Hello everybody out there in the bookverse, it's Stephanie, and today I'm back with my April wrap-up, and April was such a better reading month than May. May was probably my worst, March. March was probably my worst reading month since I started BookTube, maybe? I don't know. I did not read very much in March, but April, I definitely made up for it. I think I have 14 to talk about here with you guys, so it was a pretty successful reading month for me. So I am going to start with the books that are carryovers from March because I did film early in March and I didn't want to just like not talk about them at all. So the first one I'm going to talk about, I am so proud of myself for finishing this book. It's been so long coming. I have been reading this book forever. Like, it's been crazy how long it has taken me to finish this. And those of you who have been watching my channel for a while know that is The Shadow Rising, Book 4 of the Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. I finished this. It's done. I think I started it back in October, if I am not mistaken on the timeline, but the majority of it was read in March. So this is an adult epic high fantasy series. It's super long, super complex. It plays on the chosen one trope, has a huge cast of characters, tons of countries. It's very complex, very involved, and this is the 4th book, so obviously I'm not going to talk much about what it is about because that would be spoilers. But I don't really know why it took me so long to read this book because I did quite enjoy it, actually. I thought it was a good time. I was pretty invested in the story, but not to the point where I just kept wanting to keep reading it, to the point that I didn't want to put it down. I needed to know what happened, but I just wasn't dying to pick it up. I do feel like the end definitely picked up the pace and we raised the stakes a bit, which tends to happen at the end of books. Why is this cover so slippery? Like, it just... But overall, this book I'd say is probably my second favorite within the Wheel of Time series. I thought it was good. I thought it was fun. I definitely liked a lot of the revelations that we got in here about the history, the lore, what is to come, and what has happened in the past that's influencing now. But yeah, it just took me forever, so I feel like that dropped my enjoyment quite a bit. I'm definitely going to be continuing on with the series. I don't know when Fires of Heaven is next, and I've heard it's a bit of a slog, so we shall see, but I am definitely continuing on. This was a good book. I feel like this is a very average series for me. I enjoy it. I'm going to continue with it, but it's not a favorite. The other carryover book is Valor by John Gwynne. So I started this book the last couple days of March so I could count my TBR Star Hop as a win, which was great. I feel like I was very on track to finish this book, but then I decided to put it down and read a different book instead because I wanted to finish that one for a live show. And this one got pushed to the end of this month. So this actually is the last book that I finished within the month of April, even though it was started in March. And there was a decent amount gotten through in the month of March, but somehow it got just spread out to the end. It was not because I wasn't enjoying it. A lot of it was because I was very stressed with school, and so I wasn't reading at all for a while. And then I did a 48-hour readathon, which I will talk about later, and this was not part of that. And then I had to finish another book for a live show. So this one just kept getting pushed back because of commitments. But really, this book was so good. I loved this book so much. This was one of my favorite reads of the month. I absolutely adored it. It was so fun, so compelling. It was just a very readable book, especially compared to the first one. I feel like the first one definitely gave us a lot of information, a lot of world building, and this one I already felt very comfortable in the world. I felt very comfortable with most of the characters. We were definitely introduced to a lot more, but I just could enjoy it instead of just trying to remember everything as much. There were a lot of perspectives in this book, and I think we might have gotten a little too many, or maybe it's just because the perspectives were such short chapters, so we jumped between characters quite frequently because he didn't really put chapters back to back that were the same character. So we definitely moved around a lot within this world. I think it might have been a little bit too much for my preference, but not enough for me to not absolutely adore this book. This is such a good series. It's an adult high fantasy series that is Norse inspired. It's very military focused, and it has aspects of gods and prophecies and chosen ones and an epic war that is going on, and I love it so much. It is quite brutal as well though, so know that going into it, but I absolutely adore this series. This book was better than the first book in my opinion. I think that this one definitely built upon where we had ended up in the first one, and now we're really getting into the heart of things, and it was so much fun. I feel so invested in so many of these characters. I think John Gwynne does a really good job about writing characters that you care about, that you're rooting for, and then ones that you are just a little bit hesitant on as well, where you're like, I just don't know how I feel about you. I think that a lot of the politics going on in here were really well done as well, and overall I just think it was so good. I can't get enough of this. I am really excited to start the next book and definitely continue on with the series, but this has the potential to be a new favorite series for me. The next book I'm going to talk about is the last book that I read outside of the 48-hour readathon that I did, and that is The Wall of Storms by Ken Liu. So I did talk about this book quite in depth on a live show that I did here on my channel, so I will link that in case you want to go check out some more in-depth thoughts on this. I did it with a friend, and so you can see how we felt about this, but this is the second book in the Dandelion Dynasty series by Ken Liu. This is an epic adult high fantasy series, and it is a little bit less on the fantasy side than the other two that I have already talked about. There's not really magic in this series. What makes it fantasy is that it's a completely made up world, and there are gods involved, so they have like their a little bit of immortal magical aspect to them, but there's also like creatures and things that don't exist within our world in here as well, but there's not really like the magic that there is in a lot of fantasy series. So know that going in, it does feel very historical, and there is just a lot happening within these books. The first one, The Grace of Kings, we follow this rebellion that is overthrowing an emperor that they feel is corrupt, and we're following several characters, but our two main ones are Kunigaru and Matazindu, and they are leading this rebellion. One is very smart, and he's a tactician, and he likes to trick and win that way, and the other one is very military fighting, like honorable, that type of thing. This one, we have jumped a lot from that. There is a pretty large time jump, I think of at least 10 years between the first book and this one, so we do get a lot of new characters introduced in this one, but I do feel like I enjoyed this one more than the first one. I think it is a lot more focused, and we get a lot deeper dive into the characters and their feelings, their backstory. I felt a lot more invested in this one than I did in the first one, and I think that the things that are introduced in here are they're so fascinating, they're so intriguing, and the twists that are brought in are just so good. Oh, I was like on the edge of my seat towards the end of this book. It was so much fun, and I absolutely loved it. There is a lot of science within here as well, and he does go into a lot of depth explaining how they make different things in order to win the war. And that was a little bit of a slog for me at times, because they did cram a lot of it into a like certain portion of the book instead of spreading it out a little bit more, which I would have preferred. So there was a lot of it just back to back to back, and I feel like that's probably one of my biggest criticisms of it, is it was just too focused in one area. So I started like zoning a little bit during those points. But overall, the story was really intriguing. I loved the different commentaries on like conquering, being the conquerors versus being the people that were already there in that land, and the treatment of women in the different cultures, and just like the brutality and like how people look at different things based on how they were born, where they were born, the circumstances they were in, is very well done in this book. I really like Ken Liu's writing style, and overall, this series just is very thought-provoking, and I definitely think about it a lot. I'm really looking forward to continuing on with this series. I'm not sure exactly how I feel about it. I feel like it's one that I need to kind of like sit on and think about to really decide how I feel about it overall, and I think that I need to read the last two books to know if this series is going to be one that I absolutely adore or not. Like, it definitely has that potential, and I'm really interested to see where Ken Liu goes with the next two books. The rest of the books that I'm going to talk about, I actually read during a 48-hour readathon. That video should have gone up before this one, so you're not going to be like spoiled for that one by watching these. But yeah, the majority of my reading took place within 48 hours for this month. The rest of it was 2 books. Well, 1.5 books. That's a little embarrassing. But it was nice because I am in school, and so I was able to just kind of focus during those 48 hours, get a lot of reading done, and then the rest of the time I didn't have to stress about it as much, so that was nice. But let's start out with some Brandon Sanderson. I read a couple more short stories within Arcanum Unbounded. I read Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell, which is a short story that he wrote for an anthology that he was part of with like George R.R. Martin, and I loved it. I thought that one was so excellent. It really dove into the characters very well for such a short story. It kind of sets us up in this very brutal forest setting where there are these essentially ghosts that haunt the forest and will kill you if you make a wrong move. And we are following this family that owns this kind of inn type place, restaurant. I don't know exactly what it was, way stop, something like that. And they have been living there for a long time, and they know how to survive within this world. And then we kind of dig into like how they have been surviving there and keeping it going. And it's very interesting, very fascinating. I really enjoyed the characters in this. It did focus a lot on the female characters and their strengths. So we have a mother and a daughter, and then like an adopted daughter, and how they are able to survive without a man in this very brutal world. So I thought it was excellent. It was really just, it had the Brandon Sanderson feel to it, which I absolutely love. Plus it just really dove into these characters' lives, feelings, psyches in such a short period of time. So I really loved it. Plus it was very gripping and very exciting, and I was very invested in what was happening in that story. The next one that I read was Six of the Dusk, which I found quite a bit slower and less compellingly readable. This one, we followed this character who is a trapper on these islands that are also very brutal and deadly, and people can't really go onto them without knowing how to survive. And even then, those people tend to be killed because there are just so many things there that are out to get you. And our main character is one of those trappers, and it's very focused on like birds, but also on like invading people coming and trying to take the resources that are within these areas. So that one I feel has quite a connection with the Cosmere, and it's something that I could see being important going forward with the connections between the different like worlds within the Cosmere, because we did see a bigger scope. It was very interesting to learn some of these things, but I didn't feel quite as invested in that one as I did in some of his other short stories. So I really liked it. It was very interesting, but I think it's going to become very important with the rest of the Cosmere, so I'm kind of interested to see where he goes with that. Next, we have Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. So she is the author of the Caraval series, and this book is actually set within that same world and takes place after the events of Caraval. We see some of the characters that we saw within the Caraval series, and one of the main ones is Jax. So I gave this one a chance, even though I didn't like the Caraval trilogy, because Jax was my favorite character, but I shouldn't have. Stephanie Garber's writing just is not for me. I don't really like the way she does things. Like, her character development isn't for me. I don't really like the corniness of a lot of the things. It doesn't work. And I should have known that going in. I gave it a chance because I like Jax, but yeah, this book was not my favorite. I think I gave it 2 stars. I don't really like it. It definitely has a very YA feel to it. It has a lot of those YA feelings and tropes that you see in like old style YA. I just feel like so many people were loving this book, and I wanted to give it a shot, and I should have known that I wouldn't like it. But here we are. You live and you learn. I didn't love this book, but if you liked Caraval and you liked that series, I think you probably would like this one as well. I don't have that many thoughts about it, just because the whole time I just wanted to be done with it. If I wasn't reading it for the readathon, I would have DNF'd it. Another readathon book, The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling. This is a horror book, and it is based on the premise of this woman who marries a doctor within this town, and it's kind of a marriage of convenience because she doesn't want to move, and so she needs to get married so she can stay, and he marries her to kind of run his practice and to be his assistant. And they go in with that understanding, and the understanding that she is never allowed to go to his house. Of course, that is broken. Their circumstances arise and she ends up there. I was going into it with different expectations than what I got. I feel like I didn't mind the twist that happened and the unexpected turn of things. I actually quite liked it and I thought it was very interesting. However, I did not really like the math aspect that was put into this. I feel like it pulled me out of the story. I didn't feel that it fit as well as I think it was meant to within this story, and it just made me not get into the atmosphere of it and the feeling that I thought it should have evoked. It just kind of pulled me out of that, and I wasn't really enjoying the book as much because of those aspects. I also didn't really love our main character. I feel like she was very, I'm gonna do what I want type person, and it didn't feel like she made very smart decisions. She kind of almost made impulsive decisions, but it was based on miscommunication, and I just didn't love that. She was just annoying to me for the most part, and I wasn't really invested in her side of it. I did find the story in general very interesting though, and I did like how it ended actually. I thought that was pretty good. I was like, okay, that was satisfying. I didn't really see that coming, so it was fun. And overall, it was a very mediocre book for me. I wouldn't say it's bad. It's fun. It's interesting to read, but it's not something that I am ever going to read again, and I really don't think about it anymore. So it was average for me, but it was fun. And I would say if you like horror books, or if you haven't gotten into horror much and you want to kind of try it a bit, this is probably a good place to start because it's not too intense. I didn't think, at least. Now we're going to jump into a chunk of graphic novels that I read, which makes sense because I did a 48-hour readathon, and the first one I have is Monstrous Volume 5, War Child by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. This series is, again, an adult high fantasy graphic novel series, and it is very military focused, especially now we're getting into a lot more conflict in the later volumes of this series. It is very complex world building and it has a lot going on for being so short, so it's definitely crammed in here, and I think it can get a little bit confusing, especially if you don't read the books back to back, because I have been spreading them out, which I've regretted because I do forget things and I won't remember which characters are which. But overall, it is a very fascinating world. It has different beings, I guess you could call them, races, whatever you want to say. You have the people who are the humans, then you have the ones that are part animal, then you have the ones that are the pure first people. I don't remember the names for anything apparently, but then there are gods as well, and I love it. I think it is so fascinating. I think it is really, really well done. I would love to get more information within this world, and I'm excited to continue on with it, but I also absolutely love the art style. Let's find a really this is just right at the beginning, so not really anything on there, but I absolutely love the art style within the series. It's probably my favorite art style of any graphic novel series that I have read. I think it's just stunning. So the story's great. I do find the main character a little bit annoying, Mika. She bugs me. She is very impulsive. She is very stubborn. She always has this kind of look on her face. Dude, you're driving me nuts a little bit. She's just very extra, and sometimes I just need her to stop. But I do really like it still, and I do like her. She bugs me. But overall, this is a great graphic novel series. I would highly recommend this. I'd say overall the series is 4.5 stars for me, so it is so good, so interesting, but keep in mind this is a pretty complex high fantasy world, so if you don't like that, then you might not enjoy this. Next, I read the entirety of the White Sand graphic novel series. I actually think I read the third one outside of the 48-hour readathon now that I'm thinking about it. But I definitely read the first two in that 48-hour readathon. This is by Brandon Sanderson. It is set within his Cosmere, and it is okay. I have heard a lot of people say that they feel like the White Sand graphic novels are not worth it, and I would say I disagree, because if you want to read all of the Cosmere, then you're gonna need to read this as well. I do think that these are not his best work. I do not like the art style. I think that the dialogue is fairly corny, and it is not Brandon Sanderson's best work. I find our main character very annoying. He is just he just has that very teenage boy out to show the world feeling to him, and he is annoying. But overall, I think it's decent, probably about a 3-star series. If you want to read all the Cosmere, though, definitely you're going to want to pick these up, and they are very quick reads, very easy to read. You can't really get them anymore, though, I don't think, but I think they're going to come out with an omnibus. I did end up getting them from my library, so that's how I ended up reading them. The world we are on has sand masters where they use essentially magic to manipulate the sand. And then at the beginning of the first one, there's this huge slaughter, and we have one boy that's out to save the sandmasters. Pretty much where we're getting at here. But you do see connections with the rest of the Cosmere. I had read this before reading some other things within the Cosmere, and you definitely get some connections. So I would say it'd be kind of cool to read this if you haven't. It definitely does give you Cosmere connections, but do not expect it to be as good as most of the other things that Brandon Sanderson has written. And the last graphic novel that I read during the 48-hour readathon was Lore Olympus by Rachel Smith or Smythe. I'm not sure how to say that. This is the first volume. This is a Webtoons comic, and I actually read it on Webtoons before reading it here. But I like having it physical, honestly. I think I like it so much better this way. I just like physical everything better, really, so that's not really surprising. But let me show you some, I want to try to find you some like art within it that doesn't really give stuff away, because I really like the art style within here. Okay, I'll show you, like, this is a page. I don't feel like that gives too much away. But it's a Hades and Persephone fantasy romance retelling, and I think it's really cute. It's just Hades and Persephone kind of pining for each other while being like, no, I don't have a thing for them, when they really do, and everyone can tell. And I just think it is really well done in a very sweet way. It's very quick read. I just kind of got invested in the story and read it very quickly. But overall, it's just kind of a cute read. If you want something that is cute and sweet and fun, I would check this out. Also, do check out trigger warnings, though, because while it is a very fun time, there are some things in here that are a little bit more serious as well, so keep that in mind. But overall, it was a good time. I really enjoyed it. I would highly recommend it if you like Hades and Persephone retellings, fantasy romance, graphic novels. This one is just great. It's very easy to read, easy to get invested in the characters, and overall it was just a lot of fun. The next book was a reread, and that is Master of Sorrows by Justin T. Call. This is, again, an adult high fantasy story that centers around this boy who is the chosen one, but we're not exactly sure if he is going to be the bad guy or the good guy, I don't think, in this original first book. It's set in this world where the three main gods had this huge disagreement and war. They have disappeared, and now this boy is being trained at this school in order to be a person that goes and retrieves magical artifacts, because the people of this town believe that magic is evil and comes from the evil god, and anyone with a deformity is evil and comes from the god of evil. And so this boy has magic and has a deformity, and he's hiding it and trying to become one of these avatars that goes to retrieve magical objects, and that is pretty much his dream in life. And I love this book. I think it is so fun and easy to read. If you haven't read a lot of adult high fantasy, I'd say this is probably a pretty easy place to start. The world is not too complex, especially here in this first book. I do feel like there is a lot of potential for it to expand, because we are pretty like narrow and focused in this first book. So I think once we move out of here, it could turn into a bigger, broader world, but I haven't read any of the other books within this series. But I just really loved the setting. I love the magical school setting, even though it wasn't like like really magical, but the school setting, the trials they have to go through, I love those things. They're so much fun for me. And then we have the wise mentor trope, which I also love. We have a creepy magical forest. I love that as well. So I feel like this book just brings in so many aspects that I really, really love. Plus, I do like our main character. I feel like he makes a lot of stupid decisions, like stupid young boy decisions that I just bug me. But overall, I do like him as a character, and I think that this book has a lot of potential going forward. I have heard mixed things about the second book in this series though, and I think it's going to be a pretty long series, like 5 or 6 books, but I'm not positive. I am excited to continue on with it though, and yeah, this is another one that I finished in that 48-hour readathon. Whew, I feel like I've been talking forever. But the last book that I'm going to talk about that I read in the month of April is Zodiac Academy, The Awakening. So the first book within the Zodiac Academy series by Caroline Peckham and Suzanne Valente. This is a new adult fantasy romance, and I feel I have thoughts on this book, and I don't know how I feel about this book overall. This is a bully romance. You should know that going in, and I feel like the romance aspects were not really there in this first book. There was some, like a little bit, but overall I did not feel the romance vibes in here. It was pretty much, how many pages is this? 450-ish pages of just very immature hazing bullying that escalates and turns quite bad. Like, it's dumb. Like, everything feels very hazing to me, and I felt like the immaturity of the bullying was part of the reason why it bugged me so much. And I just did not enjoy that aspect of it. I also feel like it definitely feels YA. The writing style feels YA, the characters feel YA, the tropes feel YA, but the content, a lot of it is definitely not YA. So I don't know. That kind of difference in feeling about it was very weird for me, and I didn't love that. But it was very readable. Like, you can bust through this book very quickly. It kind of grips you and pulls you in, even though while reading it, I was like, oh, this is not really good. I still needed to keep reading, so I don't know. Does that make it a good book? You can decide. There were a lot of things in here that I just didn't love, but then there was a lot that was a lot of fun as well. So they are at a magical school, which, like I said, I love that setting. There is a competition coming up that they're preparing for that I also really love, that kind of thing in books. And so I feel like there was a lot in here that I really did enjoy. I just didn't like a lot of the immaturity of it because I didn't think it was going to be that way going in. So I think I'm definitely going to be continuing on with the series. So I have a little bit different expectations moving forward, and we'll just see where it goes. Overall, I had fun with this book. I can say that it's fun to read, and I'm hoping that the way the bullying is done is going to change or tone down in the future books. But like I said, I still liked it. So, And those are all the books that I read in the month of April. I felt like that was a lot, which is good. It kind of boosts my confidence moving forward that I can do school and read at the same time. So let me know down in the comments any of these books that you've read that you love. Let me know your feelings on Zodiac Academy if you have read that, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.